Taylor Swift just came out with a new song called Anti-Hero, which contains the lyrics, "Did you hear my covert narcissism I disguise as altruism?" Hi, Iris here. I'm a certified hypnotherapist, and today I'm going to use Taylor's latest single, Anti-Hero, to talk about women and society and narcissism and something that I see going on that I'm not sure people are talking about. I have this theory that covert narcissism and narcissism really are way more prevalent in our society than we realize, and that they are actually a symptom of our disordered society. Taylor Swift has been a young, attractive, cisgender, heterosexual, rich, white girl, now woman, in the public eye since she was, I think, 16. So who better to use as a metaphor for what society does to women with privilege and expects of women and how that twists itself inside of us? Let's look at this definition of covert narcissism from Well Health. Covert narcissism is a subtle type of narcissism. A covert narcissist lives with the need for admiration and validation, an unstable sense of self and self-importance, and emotional fragility. Their expression of these needs and vulnerability is more introverted and passive-aggressive than the typical or overt narcissist. Specifically, I want to draw your attention to the words "an unstable sense of self" juxtaposed with self-importance. Now, as a society based on hierarchical values, it makes sense to our social structure that women would feel both an unstable sense of self and a sense of self-importance. There is an unspoken hierarchy wherein rich, white, cisgender, heterosexual men are at the top, and we all know that. Women are lower in the hierarchy, but we can still achieve that sense of importance if they have certain traits, like being thin, young, white, educated, cisgender, heterosexual. I could go on, but basically there are a lot of traits, some inherent like race and some learned like education, that place women in a higher place of privilege. And I think that everything I'm saying actually applies to everyone across the gender spectrum, but it's so visible when it comes to women, in large part because of social media right now. So let's start with that unstable sense of self. We as women are taught from an early age that our value is in being beautiful and looking a certain way, a way that is actually unattainable for most women without harmful dieting and maybe even plastic surgery. Taylor Swift has talked about having an eating disorder in her Netflix documentary, Miss Americana. One thing she said was, "My relationship with food was exactly the same psychology that I applied to everything else in my life. If I was given a pat on the head, I registered that as good. If I was given a punishment, I registered that as bad." I remember how when I was 18, that was the first time I was on the cover of a magazine. And the headline was like pregnant at 18, and it was because I had worn something that made my lower stomach look not flat. So I just registered that as a punishment. And then I'd walk into a photo shoot and be in the dressing room, and somebody who worked at a magazine would say, "Oh, wow, this is so amazing that you can fit into the sample sizes. Usually we have to make alterations to the dresses, but we can take them right off the runway and put them on you." And I looked at that as a pat on the head. You register that enough times, and you just start to accommodate everything towards praise and punishment, including your own body. So we see right here this unstable sense of self and need for validation based on a society that only values women in very specific ways and does not teach them that they have any inherent value as a human being. As girls grow up and become women, their value also becomes about their career, whether they have children, the size of their house and whether it looks a certain way, their ability to cook healthy yet also delicious meals at the drop of a hat, and so much more. There are so many ways that women are judged, but none of them are really about the woman, the human being, but rather about a performance of womanhood. And it is very hard to have any coherent and stable sense of self when you're trying to hit all these different measurements. In fact, I believe that our nervous systems are kept in a state of dysregulation by these systems because rather than learning how to stand strong in who we are, we're taught to run all over the place, dashing back and forth, trying to have a flat stomach but a round butt, trying to have the perfect career and ambitions but also practice self-care, trying to be the perfect wife and mother but also the perfect career woman. And there is no room in this system for anyone to come out with a stable sense of self. And again, I think I need to say here that this applies across the gender spectrum. Men are also expected to be a certain way that doesn't leave them any room to feel grounded in who they are, separate from their careers and how much money they make. And if you're non-binary, there basically isn't even space for you in our system, which is a very binary system. So we have this base structure of an unstable sense of self because society expects a warped sense of perfection that is not actually possible. And that contributes to emotional fragility, to taking everything personally and overreacting because your nervous system is so dysregulated and you can't process anything from a place of feeling grounded. So it's very easy to get knocked off your feet, even just by, a tiny bit of criticism. And of course, Taylor gets huge and tons of criticism. And then you have a need for validation and admiration, which of course you need constantly because you have no sense of self. So your only gauge of whether you are worthy or not is what other people think of you. So you need the people around you to validate you, or you feel like you will just disappear into thin air. And with celebrities, that's kind of true, isn't it? If you aren't getting a lot of praise and your work isn't being validated, you aren't going to make as much money, be as famous. Your career might just disappear. So now going back to this sense of self-importance, which might seem like the opposite of having an unstable sense of self. But women are also put on a pedestal and constantly told how important they are. And again, this pedestal is not based on reality and the nuances of human experience, but rather a stereotype of womanhood that is very narrow. If you look at the type of women that you see held up as paragons of womanhood, it's women like Catherine Middleton, the Princess of Wales, who fits in very well with the status quo. And that's not knocking her at all because I love her, but she fits in. And Princess Diana and Marilyn Monroe, who, both were women who passed away too early to even really do anything that might knock them off that pedestal. Even depictions of Mother Mary portray her not as a human with genuine nuance to her, but as a paragon of virtue. Not to mention that depictions of her always seem to make her a tall white woman, when we know that she would have had brown skin, and Marian historians tell us that she likely would have been just shy of 5 feet tall. So when the whole world is holding you up on a pedestal, but also you know that you will fall from that pedestal if you cannot hit the mark, what you end up with is someone who has a very high sense of self due to what I think of as the fallacy or the lie of hierarchy, and also low self-esteem due to that same fallacy. And if you believe in hierarchy, then you will always be trying to climb your way up, and you will also always be afraid to get knocked down, so you will very rarely feel grounded in who you are. Taylor, of course, is in a unique position, having been a young star and growing up in the spotlight. So she has been winning awards and accolades and been put on that pedestal for so long. But she is also super aware that the world is just waiting for her to mess up and will knock her down, just tackle her anytime she falls short of perfection. And with social media, we all have the opportunity to be a star and to put ourselves on a pedestal, to basically play out this narcissistic piece of society by showcasing our low self-esteem and lack of a sense of self, as well as our sense of self-importance. It's very exhausting, actually, to worry so much about yourself and whether or not you are perfect, while also constantly comparing yourself to others and feeling like you don't live up to your or society's expectations. And I'm not really active on social media much these days for all of these reasons and how it made me feel, because I personally am working on training my brain out of these hierarchical belief systems. And for me, social media, for all that it does have, some really important benefits, it just reinforces those systems. And I know I am on YouTube right now, and I guess that's also social media, but I don't personally find that it has the same effect on me as Instagram and Facebook did. And I've never even been on TikTok, so maybe I'm just old. Okay. So let's go back to Taylor's song and my favorite lyrics. It's me, hi, I'm the problem, it's me. At tea time, everybody agrees, I'll stare directly at the sun, but never in the mirror. Those lines, all stare directly at the sun, but never in the mirror, to me, is about this narcissistic thing where as a society, we are constantly chasing things, chasing dreams, chasing achievements, chasing perfection, chasing the brightness and glory of the sun, but we can't stop and rest long enough to look at our own motivations and see ourselves in the mirror and see that none of this chasing would be necessary if we just started with a strong sense of self. Now, I don't know if that's what Taylor meant by that, but that's what I got out of it. And now let's look at the lines, "It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me." I guess what I want to say there is kudos to Taylor for recognizing these issues inside of her, but also let's acknowledge that society plays a big part in this. We are a narcissistic society and we can attack people for that, and we love to attack women especially. Or we can look at what's going on in society and ask ourselves, what stories are we complicit in that are negatively affecting our mental well-being, not to mention the young kids growing up today with social media. And if we're willing to look at ourselves and see how narcissism may be manifesting itself in our own psyches, and if we're willing to look at society and see how society's beliefs play a role in that, can we also start to wonder what our own lives and society might look like if we were willing to change these stories and create something healthier and frankly kinder? Now, I talk more about this and how to actually reframe these stories over on my blog, and I'll leave the link to that post below. But in the meantime, I want to ask you, do you recognize yourself in any of this? I know I do. And what do you imagine would be different if you had a more stable sense of self that wasn't determined by outside validation?